Hey everyone. Hey, welcome. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. To today's live lesson. We are going to be talking about the internet today, and we're going to be looking at a part 2 task similar to one you might find on the speaking paper of the B2 first or the C1 advanced exam. And if you don't know who I am Axel from Against Speaking English. So this lesson is interactive, so feel free to put your comments in the chat. I will get them. The idea is that we're going to go through my slides and we can brainstorm some ideas together, put together a lot of great resources. I will compile all the notes afterwards, upload everything to YouTube, so we'll have a great lesson to learn from afterwards, and just a lot of really great things to learn from one another. All right, so I'm just gonna get going here, but feel free to say hi if you'd like or jump in again. So as I said, this lesson today is prepared for those students who are preparing for the B2 first exam or the C1 advanced exam. However, a lot of these phrases, a lot of the things I cover are also really helpful if you are preparing for an IELTS exam, for example, or a TOEFL exam, or any other general English exam, or just for people who are looking to speak English at an upper intermediate to an advanced level. So that's what we're doing today. We are just trying to expand our knowledge on a variety of topics. So here today we're going to be talking about the internet, but just trying to learn how to speak about these topics in a general way, but in a way that we might, speak about something in our native language as well. So, because that's what we really want to be able to do at that upper intermediate advanced level, to start being able to get into topics and talk about them in a little bit more detail. So, all right. And today specifically, we're going to do a bit of a warm-up activity. We're going to be talking about changes over time today, actually. So we're going to look at that, and then we are going to specifically look at it in a part 2 task. So we'll have some images to check out together. We'll talk about them, maybe brainstorm a model answer together. And then afterwards, as usual, I will take this video, I will put our notes together, and I will upload everything onto YouTube, so you'll be able to rewatch it again there afterwards, or have that as a resource for you. And you will also be able to refer to my notes as well. Okay, so let's get right into it. So for a warm-up question, our warm-up task, we are going to be talking about these things, and we're going to be talking about how has the internet changed these things? So how has the internet changed these things? So we have, communication, education, personal relationships, work, and shopping. So couple different things that the internet has changed drastically. But before we get into answering this question, I want to focus really quickly on the tenses. So you'll notice here that this tense here, this question, how has the internet changed these things? This is present perfect, right? And we would use present perfect to talk about something that happened in the past, but during an unspecified time. So we don't know when exactly something happened. We just know that it's happened, and it probably has an effect today. So that's why we're using the present perfect. Yeah, so we want to be mindful of that. When we hear a tense in a question, we want to be able to ideally use that tense when we're answering, right? So, if I asked how are you doing today, you would probably say I am doing well, right? So, the question had present progressive there. I answered using present progressive, right? If I asked, how was your weekend? I know that we're talking about the past, right? So last weekend, my weekend was great. I went to the park. I saw my family, right? So we want to make sure that our tenses kind of match, right? So yeah. So we'll use present perfect to talk about something that happened at an unspecified time in the past. So that's what we're doing here, okay? So for this question, in particular, some examples, answers, just to start with, right? We could say maybe, because of the internet, communication has gotten faster. So there we have present perfect again, right? So we could say that, because of the internet, maybe education has moved to online platforms, right? Shopping has become more convenient, right? Or we could say maybe lots of people have begun working online, right? So again, all of these are very, very, very general statements, right? We're just talking about the change. Don't know when that happened, but we know the change has happened. Yeah, so we will use present perfect for that. I like to say that we use present perfect to introduce an idea in a very general way. So use the present perfect to introduce an idea. All right, so we use the present perfect to introduce an idea. We don't say specifically when anything happened. No details at all. We talk about it in a very general way. Then, when we talk about specifics, when we add those details, then we're going to use other tenses. So in this case, we're going to be using, so then we use other tenses to add details. So in here, for example, we're going to use simple past, right, to talk about how it was, and then we would use present or simple present to talk about how it is now, right? So here we're going to use simple past and simple present to add details. All right? Yeah, exactly. So if that isn't already clear, again, just to demonstrate, so we are going to talk about communication, and how has the internet changed communication. Maybe one answer could be, like I said, right? Communication has gotten faster because of the internet, right? It has gotten faster because of the internet. So say this is now, this is present, right? So we just know that at some point, this has happened. We don't know exactly when, but the change happened, right? And then, if we're going to add details, we'll use simple past. So say, for example, here we go. For example, 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, so say that was back here, this was 100 years ago. People wrote letters, simple past, right, to their friends if they lived far away, again, simple past. Or maybe, or they paid for expensive phone calls, right? So all of this, simple past, right? We will add we'll fill in the details with simple past here, right? And similarly, we're going to talk about now to make that comparison. We can say nowadays, you can send a text message online to a friend and they get it instantly, okay? So we have simple present, okay? So that's how this is basically going to work. So present perfect to just introduce the idea in a very, very, very general way, and then we will use simple past to fill in the details, simple present here to fill in the details as well, right? Okay, so, all right, so let's go back to then talking about these things. So now that we have an idea about how that's going to work, let's talk about these individually so we can generate some vocabulary together. Let's focus on communication first because we were just talking about that. And let's maybe brainstorm ideas about, how was it before the internet? So how was it before the internet and how it is now? Or, okay, how it was, there we go, before the internet and how it is now. All right, great. So, right. So what we said? Yeah, so it's gotten a lot faster, right? So in the past, it was slower, right? It was harder to communicate with people who lived far away, right? We also had different devices that maybe we would use, right? You had to maybe you would do phone calls, for example, right? Well, we do phone calls now, right? But using different phones or letters, right? You might have had to write letters, for examples. People might have also used, fax machines, which you don't see very commonly now. And a lot of just face-to-face interactions, right? Like you didn't really have other options, right? Whereas now, right, we can do everything over, maybe video calls or emails. You can instant message people and they get those messages instantly. So instantly, right away, right? Also, it used to be more expensive. It was more expensive to, say, call people, for example, or get in touch with people who lived far away, right? So it was really expensive, especially if you knew people overseas, right? So it was way more expensive. Now it's much more cheaper. Now, the internet data plans, they don't cost a lot nowadays, right? So big changes, right? Definitely. How about education? So again, let's talk about, how it is now and how it was before the internet. So before the internet, right, you had to use, right, physical classrooms, right? All learning was done in person. So you had to be there, right? So it was done in person, in the classroom, right? Whereas nowadays you can attend classes online. You can do everything via, streaming, online classes, online platforms, right? So an online learning platform might be sort of a website, a web portal that you would use to access the material, right? So that you would a space online that you could go into, log into. Also, before, it relied on printed material, right? You had to get books, physical hard copy books, so you needed hard copies of the materials. So hard copies, it's just another way to say, physical printed out materials, right? Whereas now a lot of material is digital. You can download, PDFs, for example, or other files online. You don't need to print things out. You can just have everything available online, and there's no more need to print things on paper, that sort of thing, right? I think another big thing too is like you used to have to search for information in libraries, for example, right? You'd need to search for things manually as well, right? Like you would have to do your own research. You couldn't really rely on the internet to give you answers, right? So you would have to do things by yourself. Whereas now, right? Now everything is, you can search things easily online, right? It's much easier to find information these days, right? Everything is available at our fingertips, right? So, and what does that mean? If things are available at our fingertips, it means that it's easily reachable, it's right there. We don't have to work very hard to get that information, and it's very convenient, right? So it's very convenient. And note that I'm saying convenient and not comfortable, okay? That is a error that I hear a lot of people say. If something is comfortable, it means that, if you think about a chair or something where you sit in it, you feel nice and cozy and warm, and it's nice and soft, so it's nice to sit on. That is comfortable. But something convenient, that is something that makes our lives a lot easier. That's easy to do. Maybe it's accessible somehow. So that's convenient. That's not comfortable, that's convenient. So yeah, researching things on Google, on the computer, is a lot more convenient than in the past, right? You had to work a lot harder when we did everything in libraries, right? Let's talk about one more thing and then get right into our task, I think. Let's talk about maybe shopping. Let's talk about shopping. So again, right, how it was before the internet and how it is now. So again, shopping, so shopping has gotten much more convenient because of the internet, right? So before, you had to go to brick and mortar stores. So a brick and mortar store is just another way to say a physical store. But we could also just say, you had to go to a physical store store, right, and see the products in person, right? Whereas now you can order everything online, right? And you can pretty much find anything. You can find anything, 24/7. And what does 24/7 mean? 24/7 means all the time, all the time. So 24 for 20, there's 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. So you can find anything 24/7. So all the time. So yeah, thanks to the internet, right? And you can also order things at 3 in the morning, right? Whereas before you could only shop when the stores were open. So, and a lot of stores are not open 24/7, at least not clothing stores, right? Or grocery stores, right? I know some things are open 24/7, but not a lot, right? Or at least not here. Here, there's not a lot of things open 24/7. And I think it's like that in a lot of parts of the world. Yeah, right? Also, too, before, there were not as many products offered, right? We could say the selection. So all the different products offered, the selection was limited, we might say. So the number of things offered were not a lot. So not a lot of options, but now you can find pretty much anything online, right? And you can shop all over the world, right? So you no longer need to depend on what's local. You can just get anything from pretty much any country nowadays, right? And get it shipped to you. So it's a lot better, right? Exactly. Yeah. So lots of great ideas. And again, right, keep in mind those tenses, right? So again, present perfect just for answering this question here, and then using other tenses for filling in the ideas, for filling in the details, right? So yeah, so simple past for talking about how it was before, and then present perfect, simple present for talking about how things are now. Exactly. Okay. Right. So let's get into a question then. So that's what we're here for. So if you're not familiar with part 2, the speaking paper of the B2 first exam and the C1 advanced exam, you are presented with 2 images on the B2 first exam, 3 images on the C1 advanced exam. And you have to talk about 2 images for about a minute. So, and in both tasks, there is a question. So there's one question on the B2 first exam. There are 2 questions on the C1 advanced exam. So you have to answer those questions while comparing the 2 pictures that you selected, okay? So I say selected because you have a choice on C1 advanced. You don't have a choice on the B2 first exam. All right. So, and also, because this exam is done with other candidates, you'll have at least one other candidate in the room with you. There might be 2, but your partner will also be asked a question about your photos, and you will also answer a question about your partner's photos as well. So that will happen after the 1-minute monologue, okay? All right, so for this question, we're going to talk about these 2 photos. And the question is, how have the devices people use to access the internet changed over the years, okay? And we can see here, right? So we have an old computer in like very, very old style of computer, right? You can see that it's not portable. It's kind of clunky, very old. And then we have a, looks like a family maybe, and they all have their little handheld devices, right? So yeah. So one approach for this task is to actually start by talking about, like, really quickly, and in the top photos, on the top photo you can see X, Y, and Z, whereas in the bottom photo you can see A, B, and C, right? But really, we don't necessarily have to start with that kind of description, because the task is really just to answer, it's to answer the question or the questions while comparing, like, while talking about the two photos, right? So nobody's asked you to describe the photos or anything like that. That's a good way to get us thinking about the material. And when you get these photos, you have no time to look at them. Like, the examiner really just, they give you the photos, they will tell you, they'll be like, here are two photos that show blah, and I want you to tell me, and they'll say the question, but it's very quick, so you have no time to prepare. So just, talking really quickly about, like, oh, you can see this and you can see this. It's a nice way to sort of ease yourself into the task, but that's not a requirement at all. So we can actually just get into answering this question if we want to, right? So thinking about it that way, yeah, why don't we just start by just talking about this question, right? So how have the devices people use to access the internet changed over the years? Well, so we could say maybe, the various gadgets people use to access the internet have gotten a lot smaller over the years, right? So gotten a lot smaller, right? At the beginning, you could only use the internet with a computer, and the first ones weren't very portable, like the one in the top photo. So you can see here that I've brought it back to the photos, but we didn't really start with a description of what we're seeing in these photos, right? We just got into answering the question. So we can totally do that. And that's fine, right? So yeah, so the various gadgets. So gadget, again, is, so it's kind of a synonym for device, but it just basically, gadgets typically maybe like a little technological, it doesn't necessarily need to be like a tech tool, but something kind of interesting, a little funky that lets you do something. But yeah, so a gadget or technological devices, right? They've gotten a lot smaller over the years. And you can see here too, because we're making comparisons, you do have to compare, right? You have to compare the two questions. So we'll be using lots of those comparative adjectives, right? Something got smaller, something got bigger, something got faster, this is better, this is worse, right? So you'll need that kind of language for this task, right? But yeah, so we're comparing while talking about this question. So here we go. Yeah, so at the beginning, right, you could only use the internet with a computer, and the first ones weren't portable like the one in the top photo. So portable just means something that is easy to carry around, right? So we can see here that it would be very hard, it would be very challenging to move this computer from one place to another. It is on that desk, it is heavy, whereas, these devices, they're tiny, easy to take from one place to another. They're very portable. Yeah. We could also say that, now there are many devices which are light and small enough to fit in your pocket or bag, like the ones shown in the bottom photo. So there we go. And then I brought the comment back to the photos. But yeah, we're just, we're focusing on the question and less about, the photos with this approach. Yeah, and what is a pocket? A pocket is like, I'm going to show you. Pocket. It's like a part of your clothing, usually, where you would put something. One of these. Take a picture. This is a pocket. You can see right there. So I know not everything is small enough to put in a pocket, but some things are. But we can also put things in bags, right? You could also see that they are all small handheld devices. So something handheld, that means something we can hold in our hands, something small enough. Something handheld is something you can hold in your hands, right? So you can see that they are small handheld devices that you can bring with you anywhere, right? Yeah, so these are definitely very little things, right? We could say also that, you could say that devices have become a lot faster too. So old computers like the one pictured were so slow that it took hours or even days to download files. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember that, and maybe I've just dated myself, but it used to take a while. Also here, in this part of Canada where I grew up, it took us a long time to get high-speed internet as well, so everything was slow for quite a long time. Yeah. So things were very slow. It took hours or even days to download files. And what does it mean to download something? To download means it's when you have information on the internet, maybe files or something, and then you would put that information onto your local device, onto your computer. So to download something means to take data and move it from one device to another device so you will have it. So to download, to move data or information from one device to another, so you have it on your local computer. Right. So and computers way back in the day, I'm just saying, because you can see a phone here, right? So computers, they were also attached to a phone line. So a phone line, that's just the basically the phone connection. So the phone line is the phone connection. And you had to wait a while for web pages to load, but now everything downloads almost instantly. And if something happens instantly, it happens immediately or right away. Right? Because things are a lot faster now, right? So we could comment on the connections, right? So we have better connections now. So again, that's that line between one device to another device. And a lot of things are wireless. So something wireless does not have any cables or lines, right? Like, phones, there is nothing attached to it, right? It's completely wireless. So you just connect it to the Wi-Fi in your house and have no need for a cable. So the Wi-Fi is that sort of the internet connection that you would connect. So you could have access to the internet without using a wire or a cable. So the Wi-Fi. So yeah, so you just connect to the Wi-Fi in your house. You have no need for a cable. And a cable, again, is like a one of the cords. One of the, like, just another name for the cord. The cord or the line that goes between devices. I was looking for a cable. And I have a million cables here. Actually, you can see here, this is a cable on my headphones, my old headphones. So that is a cable. But things that are wireless do not have cables. So you can see in the bottom photo how the devices don't have cables or cords, right? Yeah, so there are no cables, there are no cords in this bottom photo, and these devices are much more mobile. So mobile, again, is just another synonym for portable. So easy to take away, or so easy to move around. So it's easily to bring around, and that's really great, right? Yeah. So there you can see, like, I'm sure if I were just talking and I just started saying these things, like, this would probably take about a minute to say, right? So the idea, right, is that we just keep talking about the question while comparing what we see in the two photos. And that's really all we have to do for this task. It's not incredibly complicated. And some people ask me as well, like, well, what if I've run out of things to say, right? Well, if that happens, just keep comparing and contrasting the two photos that you're talking about. So don't talk about on the C1 advanced exam, don't talk about the third photo. Don't talk about the third photo, but just keep comparing and contrasting the two photos that you picked. And just do that until the time runs out, right? So, yeah. So just keep going and they will tell you when to stop. And I mean, there's lots more that we can say about this too, right? You could talk about the keyboards, right? So the keyboard is this device, this part of the computer that you would use to type on. Because many devices now have on-screen keyboards. So we call that an on-screen keyboard, where it would just pop up and you would be able to type it there, right? Also, like these little modern devices, they have touch screens, right? That you use with your fingers, right? Or you may be, depending on the device, right? Maybe it's a tablet. Some devices can also be used with a stylus, which is the little pen that you would write on it with. So the stylus is the pen, the little pen you use to write with. Also too, devices these days have much larger memories and more storage. Right? So storage, that is the space where you can keep things. So files and data and other things. Or actually, these days, nowadays, a lot of things are stored on the cloud. Oops, the cloud. And what is the cloud? Yeah, so I mean, so nowadays a lot of files, a lot of information isn't even kept on our local devices. They're not kept on the phone or whatever, right? But they're stored in sort of a space on the internet, and then you just download it and access it from your device, right? So a lot of things are stored on the cloud, and you can access this information from anywhere, right? So that's a big difference, that the information is no longer stored directly on your hard drive, but it's stored remotely instead. So the hard drive is basically just the storage again on the either the phone or the computer. It would be where the files would be stored. But if it's stored remotely instead, we mean that it's stored elsewhere. It's stored far away. So something remote is far. Yeah. So lots of things we could talk about when we're comparing these two pictures. So, it's pretty easy just to continue talking until you run out of time. Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, after you talk about the two photos, your partner will get asked a follow-up question about these photos. So let's actually just look really quickly at a follow-up question about these photos. So let's talk really quickly before we go. Which of these devices has the most advantages? So, and I think we can say that we actually can see three different devices. We have the computer, right? We have a smartphone, but this person looks like they're using a tablet as well. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about computer, talk about smartphones, and let's talk about tablets. Okay, and actually this is like an old computer. Very old computer, isn't it? So maybe let's talk about some advantages. Disadvantages. Do that. So an advantages of using an old computer. Well, maybe we could say there are less distractions. And a distraction, what is a distraction? A distraction is something that takes your attention away from the thing you should be focusing on. So, for example, on smartphones, on newer devices, there are a lot of applications and games and notifications that really pull your attention away from what you're supposed to be doing, right? So an old computer would have a lot less distractions, right? There are no notifications and fancy applications to pull your attention away from your tasks, right? So yeah, so there are less things that are going to grab your attention, right? However, we could say maybe that they are significantly slower, though, compared to modern devices, right? So we were talking about the download speeds earlier, also just the processing speed, like it takes longer for an old computer to load or compile information. It took longer to load websites, things like that. So a lot slower. But yeah, so that's definitely a downside. I mean, another advantage you could say is actually the screen is really big. The monitor were large, right? You can see here that, I mean, this this monitor is definitely smallish by today's standards, right? But it's still much larger than the monitors on these devices, right? So the monitors the monitors were large, so it was easier to see, more information. Right? So that's definitely an advantage. But again, on the downside, right, there's usually maybe like I would say compatibility issues, and like what does that mean? So compatibility has to do with how well something works with something else. So for example, maybe the file types on this computer wouldn't work very well with a smartphone device, and vice versa. You wouldn't be able to take some sort of document from a smartphone and load it on this computer because there would be compatibility issues. They would not work, the files would not work with one another. So that could be something. However, let's talk about smartphones, because I think we'll be able to come up with a lot more advantages maybe for smartphones, right? I mean, one thing is that you can access the internet from anywhere, right? And we always already talked about how they are much more portable and mobile than desktop computers, right? So that's really fantastic. We also talked about there's convenience. So there's the noun form of something that's convenient. So the convenience is really great. You can instantly access the internet from anywhere, right? So that's really fantastic too. And you can also quickly look up information online. And to look up something just means to go and research something or to check something online. So you can look up information online. So really great. But again, like we said, some of the disadvantages from earlier are that, they have a lot of notifications and apps that may be distracting, right? So, and what is a notification? A notification refers to all the little alarms or little alarms or little icons that tell you when you have a message, things like that, or when somebody has liked your post. So they're intentionally designed to grab your attention and let you know that something has happened. And a lot of apps these days have a lot of those notifications. And if you have a lot of apps, you can be bombarded by notifications all day. And what does it mean to be bombarded by something? If you're bombarded by something, it means you receive a lot of something to an excessive amount. So, maybe you get hundreds of notifications every day, or maybe you get bombarded by phone calls. So somebody keeps calling and calling and calling and calling, or they keep messaging you, like they won't stop. That's what it means to be bombarded by something. Yeah. So that's definitely a disadvantage, right? Yeah. And also actually another thing too, the battery life can be limiting. So battery life can be limited. The battery needs to be charged. And what is the battery? The battery is the little part in the phone that charges it, that gives it power, basically. So when it's not connected to a cord, the phone uses a battery to work. So yeah, and the battery life, which refers to how long the battery will last for, tends to be pretty short on cell phones, right? So that is definitely a downside. So the battery needs to be charged often, and usually the battery, we say that batteries die. We say that, so we can say that, and usually the battery dies pretty quickly. So yeah, so we say that the battery dies, we just mean that it no longer has enough power to operate the device. So the battery dies. Batteries in the phones are not usually that great, right? But that's an advantage of a tablet, actually. Usually they have great battery life, right? So the batteries will last a very, very long time, right? You can charge them and then the battery will work for a very long time. I mean, even days. I know that mine takes a very long time to die. I think that's really great. So it's definitely a lot better. Also, the screen is larger than the screen on a cell phone, right? So it's better for watching movies, maybe, or reading. So it's better for watching movies, and reading. Right, so a lot better. But a disadvantage, try to think of some disadvantages. I mean, one thing is that they may not have, well, I guess you might have internet connection in yours. Like, you might have data on your tablet. I don't know a lot of people with data directly on their tablet, but I mean, it'll connect to Wi-Fi, but they usually don't have data. You usually don't buy a phone plan for your tablet, you know what I mean? So they usually don't have data, but they can connect to Wi-Fi, we could say. Also another downside too, I'm gonna say that, high-end tablets can cost a lot. So maybe they can be a little bit more expensive, right? So, I mean, that's definitely something to think about. Anyways, again, I'm sure you can think of even more advantages and disadvantages to these different devices. And you know what? If you want to comment below after this video and put some of your ideas in the comments, I mean, that would be really great. Just to give more people ideas about what we can do with these. I think for now we've talked enough about this, so I think I'm going to wrap up. But yeah, so hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea about how we can talk about this task, and has given you some idea about some of the vocabulary we might use for talking about these things. All right, perfect. So just to wrap up, so next week there's not going to be a live stream, and then I'll be back the next week with part 3, and then the week after that with part 4. These are going to happen on Tuesdays, again at 1400 UTC. Again, the topic is going to be the internet. I think that these are going to happen on Twitch, although they might go back to Facebook. I really enjoyed streaming on Twitch. It's a lot easier to do than Facebook. I can just configure everything through the streaming platform, and I don't need a million browsers open, and it's a lot nicer. But I think that I definitely have more, well, I have a lot more followers, obviously, on Facebook, and I think that, it's much more common for people to have a Facebook account than a Twitch account, even though Twitch has been is actually, pretty decent. I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out. Anyways, but yeah, there will be a live stream on March 21st and one on March 28th. Again, looking at the internet in those different parts of the exam. All right. And as usual, if you're looking for more information, I have lots going on Telegram. Share lots of information there all the time. I also have really handy, helpful posts on Instagram, things like that. And you can also follow any of the general accounts for the daily speaking prompt, which are really helpful if you're looking to work on your speaking. And as always, too, I always have private lessons and things like that going on. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and let me know your thoughts. And yeah, okay, I'm gonna go now. I hope you have a really great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.